You ever hear about the woman with smoke in her eyes and fire in her fists? No. Then settle in. This ain't the kind of tale you find in books or sermons. It's the kind whispered across poker tables and traded on wind-chapped lips by men too proud to admit she was braver than them. Her name was Clara Develin, and she didn't ride with no posse or wear no star, but she stood her ground when devils came riding. It happened one late summer evening, out where the Red Canyons slashed through the Dakota Territory like old battle wounds. The sun was dying slow, bleeding orange across the rocks. Dry wind curled like a snake through the pass they called Devil's Arch. Nothing good ever came out of that place, just echoes, broken wagons, and bones bleached white by regret. But Clara didn't believe in ghosts or bad omens. She believed in work and steel and in keeping promises, even when the world spat in your face for it. She'd lost her husband 2 years back to fever and silence, buried him herself beneath a cottonwood tree near the Platte. After that, she took up his tools and her father's journal, hitched 2 old mules to a rickety wagon, and called herself a wheelwright. Some laughed. Others called it brave. She called it surviving. Clara rode alone, repairing wagons from Wyoming to Dakota, sharpening plow blades, straightening axles. She charged fair, kept her word, and never asked for help unless it was for lifting something heavier than her spine could manage. On that particular evening, she was coming from a ranch north of Bighorn with a few coin pouches and a bag full of sharpened chisels. The wagon creaked beneath her as she guided it toward the narrow stone throat of Devil's Arch. She was tired, but not enough to ignore the feeling in her bones, the stillness that wasn't natural. Birds gone quiet. Even the wind had stopped. They came fast. 6 shadows on horseback, faces wrapped in cloth, dust swirling behind them like smoke from a funeral pyre. Clara reached for her revolver, but a rifle cracked first. The bullet struck her mule, and everything tipped sideways. The wagon flipped. Clara was thrown hard onto the rock, dazed. Before she could rise, they were on her. The leader dismounted slow, tall, lean, with a voice like wet gravel. Mal Crow. Folks in mining camps spoke of him in hushed tones, like he wasn't a man but something worse. He wasn't interested in her coin or her work. He wanted her tools, her wagon wood, and her body marked and traded like cattle. She fought, Lord, she fought. Bit one man's ear nearly off. Kicked another in the knee hard enough he'd limp for life. But 6-1 ain't fair, and it ain't meant to be. They beat her bloody, tore her blouse, and held her down. Then came the hot iron, seared into the flesh just above her shoulder blade. A brand shaped like a crooked C. Clara didn't scream, not out loud, but she remembered every inch of that pain, every laugh that echoed off the canyon walls. They left her there in the dust, broken and discarded like a mule too old to pull. Took her tools, her revolver, and what was left of her wagon, rode off west toward the mining trail, carrying smoke and cruelty with them. For a long while, she didn't move. Blood pooled beneath her. The canyon shadows grew long. But then, somehow, she rolled onto her side, one arm broken, ribs maybe cracked. She saw a buzzard high above her and whispered, "Not today." She crawled, inches at first, then feet. Her fingers dug into dry soil, nails cracked on stone. She reached a narrow crevice beneath a boulder, barely deep enough for a fox, and dragged herself inside. Dust choked her lungs. Her breath came in shudders. Night fell. The wind returned, colder this time, howling through Devil's Arch like it mourned her. She didn't sleep. Not really. Just drifted in and out of dark, clutching the torn strap of her tool satchel like it was her child. Her skin blistered. Her eyes burned. But she didn't cry. Somewhere in the dark, she muttered the words she'd written in the margins of her father's journal. Survive first. Everything else comes after. That night, something in Clara Develin didn't just survive. It hardened. Like iron in flame. Like a name etched into steel. They thought they left her to die. But they only fed the fire. Ashridge was the kind of town you didn't find unless you were lost or owed something to someone cruel. Built into the dust and heat of the Dakota plain, it crouched low against the wind, like it knew better than to stand tall. A narrow strip of dry boardwalk connected its buildings, saloon, general store, mining office, church, and at the edge of it all, a squat blacksmith shop that had seen more scars than a battlefield. The morning sun was just cracking open when Clara Develin came stumbling in, leaning against the bones of what used to be her pride. Her shirt clung to her side, where dried blood had painted it stiff. Her lips were split, face smeared with dust and ash. One of her boots was missing. The branded mark on her back burned like it was still pressed fresh. She didn't cry out, didn't ask for help. She just kept walking down the street, like a woman half dead, half possessed, clutching the remnants of a leather satchel as if it held the last piece of herself. The few folks on the boardwalk stopped dead. A mother pulled her child inside the bakery. A merchant turned the open sign to closed. Everyone knew what that mark meant. The Crow gang had touched her. That made her untouchable. Sheriff Harlan stepped out of his office just long enough to see her before backing in again and drawing the curtain. He didn't need trouble. Not that kind. She made it halfway to the water trough outside the smithy before her knees buckled, and she fell hard. The iron rang once inside the forge, then silence. From the doorway, a man emerged, tall and broad-shouldered, with sit-up arms and a leather apron tied low over faded denim. His left sleeve was pinned at the elbow. A burned scar curled up from his collar to the edge of his jaw. His eyes weren't the kind to panic or blink. They were slow and blue and steady like deep water. Jude Calder didn't speak. He just moved, picked her up like she weighed nothing, and carried her inside the forge. Folks watching from behind windows waited for the inevitable explosion. Maybe from the girl, maybe from the gang, maybe from Jude's father, Elias Calder, the old blacksmith with hands like iron and a temper to match. Elias showed up 20 minutes later, boots kicking up the dust, jaw clenched like it was welded shut. "You know who she is," he said, standing just outside the forge. Jude didn't look up from where he was washing blood from Clara's shoulder with warm water. "She's hurt. She's marked. She's staying." Elias paced a line in the dirt. "You're skinned for fire, boy. You think they won't come for her? You think they won't come through you to get to her?" Jude wrung out the cloth in a bucket and tossed it aside. "Let him try." Elias cursed low under his breath and walked away. He didn't say Jude was wrong, just that he was foolish. By nightfall, word had spread. A crow-marked woman was under the smithy's roof. Some townsfolk crossed the street rather than walk near it. A few whispered that Jude had gone soft in the head, that maybe he was still grieving over what he'd lost when he lost his hand. But Clara? She didn't say much at first. Fever gripped her hard the first day, sweat soaking her bandages, muttering half-formed words in her sleep, about iron, about wolves, about a man with gold teeth. Jude stayed near, feeding her broth with a spoon he'd carved himself, changing dressings, making her a cot from old saddle blankets and soft leather. She woke on the third morning with fire in her eyes and no strength in her limbs. "You should have let me be," she rasped. "I didn't," Jude said, sitting beside her with a mug of coffee. Clara studied him then, really looked. The missing hand, the burned scars, the way his eyes didn't avoid hers, even when they brimmed with anger or shame. "What do you want?" she asked. "Nothing," he said. "You needed a place. You've got one." She narrowed her gaze. "No one helps for nothing." "Maybe not, but I ain't no one." It was the first time Clara felt something close to steady since Devil's Arch. By the end of the week, she'd insisted on moving to the forge itself. Said she couldn't sit still while someone else fed her. She wasn't built for stillness. Jude didn't argue. Instead, he handed her a rasp and a dull plow blade and said, "If you're up for it." She was. The rhythm came back to her fingers faster than she expected. Scrape, sharpen, dip, repeat. Her shoulder ached, but the work soothed the shaking that lived in her chest. She moved like someone who'd rebuilt herself before. They didn't talk much at first, but there was comfort in the quiet. Heat from the forge, the clang of steel. Clara watched how Jude moved with one hand, hammer tucked against his ribs, shaping iron with the ease of a man who'd long since made peace with what he'd lost. She respected that. On the fifth night, she told him about her father, a smith in Kansas City, stubborn and kind, who taught her to shoe a horse before she could write her name, how she married young, lost her man to a sickness, and decided she'd rather make her way swinging a hammer than begging for pity. Most men laughed when I told them I was a wheelwright, she said. Some tried to take more than I offered. Crow's the first to take it all. He didn't, Jude said gently. You're still here. She nodded, jaw tight. I swore no man would ever own me again. I ain't breaking that vow. Not for fear. Not for kindness. I wouldn't ask you to. That was all. But something settled between them that night. Not soft, not romantic, not yet. Just solid, like iron cooling into form. Outside, the town whispered and waited, watching the forge, watching the shadows. Everyone knew the Crow gang didn't let go of what they claimed. But everyone also knew that no one told Jude Calder what he could or couldn't hold on to. Especially not now. The hammer rang out in the forge like a heartbeat, steady, defiant. Clara worked the bellows with one arm, sweat streaking down her temple, the fire casting her silhouette onto the wall behind her like something out of legend. She wasn't making horseshoes now. She was crafting teeth for the earth, sharp iron caltrops and jagged spikes meant to cripple horses and slow men. War was coming, and she knew how to prepare. It started that morning. A lone rider came in from the south, dust trailing behind like smoke. He didn't dismount, just rode straight through town, cold-eyed and calm, stopping outside the sheriff's office long enough to toss down a splintered pine plank. It hit the dirt with a hollow thud, carved into it, rough and cruel. She's ours. You've got till sundown tomorrow. No signature. Didn't need one. Everyone in Ashridge knew the handwriting of the Crow gang. The sheriff stood staring at it, lips moving but no words coming. He was a good man once, maybe. Now he was just a man who'd survived by staying quiet. Survived by looking the other way. This, though, this was too loud to ignore. By noon, the whole town knew. The message spread faster than fire in dry brush. Jude found Clara in the forge, already working, sleeves rolled to her elbows, hands blackened with soot. When he told her, she didn't blink. Well, she said, I suppose they think they're generous, giving us until sundown. He watched her for a long moment, his eyes shadowed by thought. Sheriff will come, he muttered. Try to talk me out of it. She didn't stop hammering. Then don't let him. He didn't, but the sheriff came anyway, hat clutched between his fingers, sweat slicking his brow. You're making it hard on everyone, Jude, he said, standing outside the forge like a preacher at a sinner's door. There's more at stake than pride. There always is, Jude said, not bothering to look up. This ain't your fight. It is now. Sheriff glanced inside, saw Clara hammering a rusted barrel down into something that didn't look much like farm equipment. He stepped closer, voice dropping low. You think you can hold out against Mal Crow and his kin? They'll burn this whole damn town to ash for spite. And when they do, folks will remember who brought her here, who kept her. Jude leaned forward slowly, his blue eyes like ice melting under fire. She came on her own. She ain't leaving on no man's orders. Sheriff's mouth twitched. Don't make this town your grave, boy. Jude closed the forge door without answering. That night, the town gathered in the church hall. Not for worship, there hadn't been real preaching in months, but for fear. The voices rose fast. He's putting us all in danger. Over a woman? They're murderers, not men. They branded her. What do you think they'll do to us? He should send her away. Clara wasn't there. She didn't need to be to know what they were saying. The walls of a small town are thin, and gossip travels quicker than the wind. She stayed in the forge, soaking nails in kerosene, counting bullets she'd found buried in an old trunk behind the workbench. When Jude came back, he said nothing for a long while, just watched her shape iron into sharp stars. Let me guess, she said finally. They want to throw me to the wolves and hope they bite soft. Some, he admitted. You agree? No. She stopped working and turned to him. Her eyes caught the forge light, just right, flint and fire, rimmed with something close to sorrow. And then she noticed, for the first time, the ragged scar climbing up his shoulder, disappearing under his shirt. She stepped forward, hesitant. Where'd you get that? He paused, then pulled the collar down slightly. The burn was brutal, old, deep, and shaped like coiled smoke. Clara narrowed her eyes. I heard a story once, she said, about a man they called the Ashridge ghost. Didn't talk much. Saved a bunch of kids from a barn the Crow gang set on fire. Folks said he disappeared after. Jude didn't answer. Wasn't a ghost, was it? She said softly. I was younger. Still thought the law meant something. He replied. I got the kids out. Tried to go back for a girl trapped in the loft. Fire caught the beam I was climbing. Lost a hand. Lost the badge later. And the town. Let the gang walk. Said they didn't see who lit the match. Said I was lucky to be alive. That's when I stopped asking folks to do the right thing. Clara looked at him, her voice steady. And now? He smiled faintly. Now I'm asking myself. They stood in silence, the forge breathing low around them. Outside, the wind kicked up dust, whispering warnings against stone and timber. But neither of them moved. The decision came not in some grand speech or act of rage. It came with calm, with knowing. Clara picked up the sawed-off shotgun she'd been mending. The stock was splintered, but the barrel was clean and the trigger tight. I'm not running, she said. Not again. Jude nodded. Good, because I'd be a fool to fight without you. They went to work. She made caltrops, dozens of them, sharpened to tear hooves and feet alike. Horseshoe spikes, long and jagged, were hammered into planks that could be dragged across the road. Jude poured oil into lanterns and packed black powder into clay jars wrapped in canvas. Smoke bombs, they hoped. Fire if need be. When dawn broke, Ashridge would be quiet. But the forge? The forge would burn like a warning bell in the mouth of hell. And Clara Develin, branded, broken, and rebuilt, would be standing in the center of it, ready. Ashridge had never been quieter than it was that evening. Not even during funerals. Doors were locked, curtains drawn, lamps extinguished. The air held its breath. Chickens were penned early, dogs hidden under beds. The town looked like it had folded in on itself, hoping to disappear. But not the forge. The forge breathed like a beast, low, steady, full of glowing heat and iron teeth. Smoke curled up through the chimney, as if the fire inside was alive and waiting. Jude and Clara had been working since dawn, barely speaking, communicating in nods and half-glances. Every nail hammered into dirt, every caltrop scattered beneath the gravel. Every keg of coal soaked in oil had its place. Clara rolled the last barrel into position near the blacksmith's entrance, its top covered in kindling and wrapped cloth. One good shot would ignite it. Jude tied the trigger wire from a sawed-off wheel to a beam inside. If the gang pushed through the main door too fast, the whole frame would buckle. Remind me not to stand near that when it goes, Clara said, wiping sweat from her brow. You won't be, Jude said without looking. You'll be upstairs. She frowned. I'm not hiding. You won't be. You'll have a cleaner shot from the loft. It's cover, not cowardice. She didn't like it, but she nodded. She knew he was right. The sun dipped lower, orange bleeding into blood red as it kissed the horizon. Shadows stretched like long fingers across the main road. That was when they came. 6 riders, just as expected. Their silhouettes emerged from the heat shimmer in the distance, slow and easy, like they were out for a Sunday ride. But the gleam of rifles and pistol grips said otherwise. Their horses kicked up dirt and malice with every step. At the front, on a thick-chested black gelding, rode Mal Crow. He looked worse than memory had painted him. Tall, narrow-eyed, mouth full of jagged gold teeth that caught the sun like devil's fire. His coat was buffalo hide, trimmed with scalps. A silver revolver hung low on his right hip like it had never missed. He grinned the moment he saw the forge still standing. They didn't stop. The gang rode straight up to the blacksmith's yard, dismounted like kings, and spread out casually, each man grinning, guns loose in their hands. One, a wiry rat-faced man with a pink scar across his eye, spat on the ground and walked up to the forge door. Jude stood in the center of the yard, hands at his side, watching them come. His left sleeve was pinned at the elbow, but no one looking at him thought he was any less dangerous for it. "Evening, boys," he said flatly. Mal clicked his tongue. Jude called her. Didn't expect to see you back in the saddle, son. Thought you traded your fire for fear. Didn't know you were still dragging your stink across the plains, Jude replied. Mal laughed, slow and easy. I'm here for what's mine. Jude didn't blink. She's not yours. That brand on her back says otherwise. That brand don't mean anything here. Mal's grin stretched wider. That's where you're wrong. It means everything. It means we broke her. It means we ride where we want, take what we want. That brand. It's law in these parts. Not anymore, came a voice from above. Mal tilted his head. Clara stood in the loft window, her revolver leveled squarely at his head. Mal raised an eyebrow, chuckling. There she is. Didn't figure you for a fighter, darling. But I do enjoy surprises. She's not the only surprise, Jude said. Then he pulled the wire. The wheel trap collapsed. The front beam cracked and fell, sending one of the outlaws sprawling to the dirt. At the same time, two of their horses reared violently, hoofs torn open by hidden caltrops. A scream rang out from one of the riders as he tumbled under his own mount. The yard erupted into chaos. Jude fired from the hip, his single hand steady, hitting the rat-faced outlaw in the thigh. The man howled and dropped his rifle. Clara fired from aloft, her father's revolver kicking hard into her palm. One clean shot slammed into a second outlaw's chest, spinning him sideways onto the dirt. Barrel number 1 lit with a crack of flame. Burning coals spilled across the gravel, igniting a chain of oil-soaked rags that crept toward the second keg like a serpent of fire. One of the remaining riders rushed the forge, ducking under the loft window, shouting for Mal. Before he could reach the door, a shotgun blast ripped from above, from the rooftop across the street. A woman in a faded blue dress stood there, gray hair tied back, an old double-barrel balanced steady in her arms. Been waiting a long damn time, she growled. Didn't think I'd live to see you again, Mal. He turned, eyes narrowing. Liza. She fired again, striking one of the outlaws in the back. He dropped without a sound. Name's Miss Liza now, she said, reloading. Mal snarled. Kill her. He never got the chance. Jude charged. They met just outside the forge, two old enemies bound by heat and hate. Jude slammed into Mal with his shoulder, knocking the wind from him. They grappled, fists flying, gun forgotten. Mal headbutted Jude, sending him staggering. Blood poured from Jude's nose, but he didn't stop. Inside the forge, fire bloomed. Molten metal sloshed in its pan, glowing like the sun's heart. They crashed through the doorway, knocking tools aside, stumbling over forge tongs and iron scraps. Mal grabbed a hammer, swung. Jude ducked and punched him in the gut, sending the hammer skittering across the floor. Mal grunted, spit blood, and tackled him into the bellows. The fire roared louder. They wrestled, rolled, fists smashing against ribs and jaw. Jude's pinned sleeve was torn off in the struggle, revealing the twisted, scarred stump beneath. Mal looked at it and laughed. Should have stayed broken cripple. Jude didn't answer. He reached behind with his good arm, grabbed a pair of red-hot tongs from the coals, and shoved them toward Mal's face. Mal dodged barely, but the heat singed his cheek, blistering it instantly. He screamed and lunged again, this time with a knife pulled from his boot. And then Clara was there. She stepped into the forge like a shadow walking through fire, her revolver empty, but her grip strong. In her hands, the branding iron, the same one they used on her. Mal turned just in time to see her raise it. His eyes widened. Don't. She brought it down. The iron hissed and sizzled against his cheek. Mal's scream shook the rafters. He fell backward, clawing at his face, thrashing. Jude kicked the knife away, breathing hard, blood dripping down his chin. Outside, the last of the Crow gang was either dead or fleeing. Miss Liza reloaded her shotgun, keeping the rest at bay. Firelight painted the yard in gold and crimson. The townsfolk slowly emerged, silent at first, then stunned. Clara stood over Mal's writhing body, chest heaving. You wore your name like it meant something, she whispered. Now wear mine. Mal tried to speak, but no words came. Just a gurgle and the stench of scorched flesh. Jude stepped up beside her, eyes still burning from the fight. Together, they looked down at the man who'd branded dozens, hundreds. He'd never speak again, never ride again. He was broken, branded, and no longer feared. The forge roared behind them as the sun finally disappeared below the horizon. Ashridge breathed again, for the first time in years. Smoke clung to the rafters of Ashridge long after the fires had died. It curled between buildings and settled into the cracks of the boardwalk, like it didn't know how to let go just yet. But as dawn crept over the ridgeline and spilled soft light into the town, folks stepped out into the quiet, blinking like survivors waking from a bad dream. For a while, no one spoke. The blacksmith's yard looked like a battlefield. Spent casings glittered in the dust. Blood stained the stones where Clara had stood her ground. One of the forge's windows had shattered from the heat, and the roof bore black scars from where the fire had threatened to take it. But the building stood, and so did they. Clara Develin sat on the steps of the forge, arms wrapped around her knees, eyes red and rimmed with soot. Jude stood nearby, leaning against the doorframe, his shirt torn and face battered, but whole, alive. They watched in silence as the townspeople gathered, hesitant at first. Then, one by one, they came closer. Miss Liza was the first to speak. She lowered her shotgun and gave Clara a slow nod. "About time someone paid him back," she muttered, voice still raw. Then came the grocer's wife, with a broom and a bucket. The stable boy, leading a mule and offering help with hauling debris. The preacher, carrying a jug of fresh water. They didn't say much, didn't offer apologies with words, just picked up what needed fixing and set to work. By mid-morning, buckets of water doused the last embers, boards were hammered back into place, and the forge breathed again, not as a weapon, but as a home. The sheriff came around just before noon, hat in his hands, his boots dragging like they weighed too much. He stood in front of Clara and Jude, eyes low. "I've been a coward," he said. "A fool, too." Neither of them spoke. He cleared his throat. "Guess we all forgot what right looked like. But now I remember." He reached into his coat and set his badge on the railing between them. Then he turned and walked away, leaving it there. A small, tarnished circle of metal. Clara watched it for a long time before she said, "He's not wrong." Jude didn't answer, just exhaled through his nose and sat down beside her. That afternoon, the town rang with the sound of rebuilding. Children peeked around corners. Miss Liza reopened the saloon with a cracked grin and half a bottle of whiskey. The air shifted, lighter now, no longer heavy with fear. By the end of the week, Clara had unpacked a few things that survived the fire. Her father's journal, the broken revolver, the last of her chisels. She set them on a shelf in the back room of the forge, her forge now, too. Jude handed her a brush and a nameplate. "What do you want to call it?" he asked. She looked at him, then at the scar on his shoulder, then at the wide-open sky beyond the forge doors. "Devlin and Calder," she said. "Steel for anyone with the will to use it." They painted the sign together, hung it above the door. It swung in the wind like a banner. Soon, young girls from town started visiting, first out of curiosity, then purpose. Clara let them sweep floors, hand her tongs, and eventually shape their first nails. She showed them how to work with fire and not fear it. Jude taught them too, not with lectures, but with demonstration. How to swing a hammer with control, how to defend your footing, how to get back up when something tries to knock you down. One evening, long after the sun had set and the forge was glowing low, Clara was sweeping the floor when her broom caught something under Jude's cot. A small wooden box, old and scuffed. She opened it. Inside, a tin badge. Rusted, but still legible. Deputy U.S. Marshal. She stared at it for a long moment, like it was some artifact from another world. Then she turned as Jude walked in, wiping soot from his hands. "You were Law," she said quietly. "Real Law." He paused, then nodded. "A long time ago. You never said. No reason to." She held up the badge. "Why'd you leave it behind?" His eyes flicked to the metal, then back to hers. "I wore that when I tried to save a girl from a burning barn. She died. So did a part of me. Town let the men who did it walk free. Said they couldn't prove it. Said justice needed proof." He paused. "I guess I figured justice just needed fire." She set the badge down gently. "Why keep it?" In case I needed reminding, he said. Didn't need a badge to do the right thing. But sometimes it helps to remember you tried. Clara looked at him, then back at the forge, the place where everything had changed. You did more than try, Jude, she said. You stayed. He smiled, soft and quiet. So did you. The town never went back to the way it was. That wasn't possible. But it changed in the ways that mattered. No more looking the other way. No more letting evil wear its boots unchecked. Clara and Jude's forge became more than a place for iron. It became a place of memory, of fire and healing, of building, not just repairing. And folks came to see them, not just for work, but for the story. Because stories like that don't die. Some say the crows were just dust in the wind after that night. Others say Ashridge was never the same. But ask anyone about the blacksmith's son and the woman with fire in her fists, and they'll tip their hat every time.